Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another edition of 1+1, your place for inconvenient truth-telling and myth-busting. Joining me today is a guest I'm so honored to have on. We have Tabetha Wallace, former Watching the Hawks co-host and correspondent that still airs on RT, although it's censored right now. And Tabetha is a longtime journalist, but she worked at Miramax, Newsweek, and other media companies. She hails from the Midwest, Wisconsin, and she's joining us from Minnesota. And she's on to discuss so many issues. So let's try to get to all of them. Ms Wallace, thanks so much for coming on. It's a real honor to finally get the chance to speak to you.
I'm thank you, and thank you for being patient. My schedule's been a little wild over the last 6 months.
No problem. No problem. No problem. Like I said, it's a real honor to finally speak to you voice to voice. And so let's get to all the diverse topics I wanted to talk to you about. The first question I wanted to ask you is, what to you is feminism, and what are some of the everyday sexisms women still or yourself still go through on a day-to-day experience that are often overlooked, and do you have any insights into the patriarchy that exists in the world of broadcast journalism and big media companies?
Wow, yeah. I don't know how much time we have, but I could talk on that for a while. I think for me, the hardest part are sort of processing a lot of things over the last few years is realizing that, because I think the Kavanaugh hearings were this moment that, at least when I was in DC, was a very polarizing moment, because it was the minute men started getting hostile, like really hostile, both within it and without, and like the general community. It's just, white middle-aged men got very hostile about women. And it sort of was a weird culture shift, because I had to realize that it wasn't that there was no sexism when I was in my 20s or my 30s. It's not that there was no whatever, any of these things. It's not, we accepted certain things for so long. And, I'm Gen X, so there's not even a lot of us, even if I wanted to start a revolution gender or generational wise, well, good luck. But I think now, looking at millennials and Gen Z, they are so far ahead of the game. They've done the extra work, because those of us who grew up in, as a teenager in the 90s, our idea of what feminism was based on your Gloria Steinem white feminism that was taught in schools.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
If you take women's studies in, say, 1996, like I did, not a lot of color. It's a very white set of information that is fed to you. And so the thing that took me a long time to learn was that not everybody then, after that, immediately moved to New York or moved to a bigger city and sort of
advance a feminist movement.
Right. And you can actually see that stuff and really understand where the problems are. It pains me that I'm in my 40s and I'm watching people argue that trans people are gonna hurt feminism, that Black women are gonna hurt feminism, that women of color of any kind, it's gonna hurt us if we take them on board. And I'm like, that's all the mistakes that were made in the 60s and 70s. It's oh no, we can't do this. Oh, we need to do this. And I think so much of it is based on how many views they get on TikTok or Instagram or whatever, their hot take.
Yeah.
And it's, it's great to buy a t-shirt. I'm not against buying t-shirts. I love a good pithy political t-shirt for sure. But there's a little more work that has to be done after you buy the t-shirt. You can't just like be like, we're going to march about it and not have a plan for what happens after. And I think that's where feminism has been stuck in neutral for a while.
I think I completely agree with you. So for you, is it safe to say that feminism for you is simply just equality between the genders, and of course taking back power that's been deprived of women, and much more value on stuff that we criminally overlook, like childcare, like supporting single mothers that have children that are either autistic and stuff like that. But that feminism is not just equality between middle class men and women. It's mostly marginalized and impoverished, also Black, Latinx, and our indigenous brothers and sisters and elders, right?
Right, exactly. I think you have to really look at your own history, and I think a lot of people, especially white people, and I am white, so white, like so white.
That's it's the Midwest, it's Wisconsin.
Yeah,
rockin' Wisconsin.
23andMe was not a huge surprise. I was like, no color. All right, I guess that's how it works. But I think when we look at our like past, there's a lot for us to see. There's a lot of culture, there's a lot of history, there's a lot of everything. Something like 20 million or more Americans can trace their ancestors back to the Mayflower. I can. And people are always kind of in this thing of, oh my God, that's really cool. And like, your great-great-grandmother was, well, like 13th great-grandmother was the oldest woman to survive the first winter. And I'm like, yeah. Oh yeah, she probably did cook the first Thanksgiving. She's probably in charge of it. That's cool. Her husband murdered a bunch of Native Americans though.
So maybe we should there's nothing wrong with airing out the dirty laundry. It's the bizarre pride of airing out the dirty laundry, like the white supremacist John Wayne movies, or or the fact that America celebrates Columbus Day. And when you actually like read about Thanksgiving, the real Thanksgiving, there's nothing in that movie that's PG, like, oh no, temporarily the Native Americans and and the white settlers got along and had turkey and trade food. Like, no, it was
they got together to go slaughter another Native American tribe.
Exactly.
Like, my grandpappy was all like, oh, I don't like them, but if you'll help us fight these other people of color, I'm in. Who later, by the way, it's John Billington is my ancestor on the Mayflower. And the funny thing about him is he didn't survive long because he shot a guy over a hunting land and became the first person to be hung like in the colonies for white on white crime. So from there to like Eminem and white trash culture and all of that is who I grew up as. It makes sense. There's a line. You're like, oh, yeah.
Well, that's that's actually a perfect segue then to the second question, which is with all that said, talk a bit more about about some of the everyday sexism that feminist writer and actress Laura Bates has written extensively about. Because from what I know about you, I understand that you're working on the project which is going to explore toxic work environments and office place bullying and microaggressions, right? Or
that's a good way to sum it up. Who knows where it'll go? It's one of those things that I'm starting in one place that is a common place for a lot of us, in that we were in a workplace or in an environment that became very like unhealthy, and an entire world. And that goes from like being a super liberal progressive at a kind of right-leaning news station for like 5 years. It's not a comfy place to be. And people will purposely do things to make your life worse. And that's how people deal with their political differences. For me, I was never left enough, or I was never right enough, or I was too far left for a centrist. Like either way, I was always wrong. And because I was a woman, I just didn't understand. I didn't have an Ivy League degree. I didn't have a postgraduate degree. I didn't have the things that they decide is like acceptable. And this happens over and over in a million places in life, and in different workplaces, from reality show sets to an everyday office, I'm sure, because I hear it from other people.
So even in the newsroom, and so even in the newsroom and the media, and the media companies that you worked at, there was a lot of everyday sexism, so sexual harassment, sexual jokes, or if there was differences of opinion, there was that kind of like microaggression and passive aggressive bullshit that went on.
Yeah, I mean, I worked at Miramax, for God's sake, with Harvey and Bob Weinstein. So yeah. And that's where I think I learned to get like a real, like, I've always been the kind of person, like I was taught, like the women in my family run everything. Like I come from a very matriarchal thing where very strong men as well, but honestly, they take that second to be like, what do you think, to the women? Like when the women say this has to be done, they listen. And so I grew up in a very matriarchal environment. So then to be in such a patriarchal environment was hard for me. But the way that I learned, like the armor that I made to deal with that in my late 20s was just like laughing until I made them uncomfortable, that I was laughing too hard at their shitty sexist jokes. I will say at the time, I did not know that Harvey Weinstein was an actual fucking rapist. I thought he was just creeper, don't go to his house, don't wear heels around the office.
And from the documentaries I've seen on the Harvey Weinstein, and I don't agree with all of the sort of like Me Too scandals New York Times and corporate media has covered, but I think it's safe to say that Harvey Weinstein, like, there's no being around the bush. The guy was a serial rapist. But but they mention a lot in the documentaries that he already had a reputation of being quite the sort of like office place bully, very aggressive personality, so you kind of had to walk on eggshells. So I don't know if you're still under an NDA or whatnot, but
who's gonna sue me, Harvey?
Well, then, so talk to us a bit about that.
I would love for him to do that. I would love for anybody that I talk about to sue me, whether it's the Russian government or Harvey Weinstein. I'm like, come at me, bro. This will be cute. I got nothing for you to take. I got nothing and I'm ashamed of. It just baffles me, the things that people will try to be like, oh, I know this about you, or oh, you did this or you didn't do this. And I'm like, and who cares?
Yeah.
Like, you're the person who cares, but it's just you. Like, nobody cares enough. But so I think what I learned from working for people who weren't abusive in the workplace, but very stern, like at Newsweek, I was like the third assistant to Fareed Zakaria.
Yeah.
And he had a thing about punctuation. Sorry, not punctuation, punctuality. He had a thing about punctuation too, I'm sure. He was an editor of a magazine. But he had this thing about punctuality. And I was in that way, part of my 20s, where we're all like habitually 15 minutes late to everything.
Yeah.
And we take too long for a coffee break. Like, that was just, that's what we do. He had a little talking to me about that. And now this is why 20 years later, I am still like, I get to the airport like 2 hours early. I get everywhere like 15 minutes.
Okay, interesting.
Right? So like, you can learn things in a very, what I'm trying to say is that I think there's a way you can learn things in a tough environment that can also have emotion and honesty and all these things. And it can exist. It can't exist when someone like is like walking through the office with a cigarette and ashing on your desk and screaming about Quentin Tarantino or something like that's, and then craping people at night and then coming to the office the next day like, you know, he was just this cool dude. But I did learn in there, it's sort of like they want you to be uncomfortable.
So
They
it's
want you,
yeah. No,
yeah,
go on.
it's total narcissistic manipulation. They want you to think that you're
Lesser
afraid.
that you're lesser than them, that you're just
Right.
that you should be so lucky to be a speck of dust in their, you know, universe, right?
It's just dust. That's all we are. We're just dust in their amazing universe they've created, whatever it is. And that is not a workplace that is ever going to be healthy for anybody. And I think as more and more of us, myself included, who find that we're not as neurovergent as we thought we were, and just I think the trauma of, you know, the last 20 years or so has done to us since 9/11, just to even like put a pin on it and say like from that point on how everything changed and why we don't trust media and why we have a problem with it. And yeah, I think we've hit that point where everybody's like, what is the point of cable news?
Yeah.
What is the point of infotainment?
Yeah. What's even
Because
the
it doesn't.
what's even the point of Hollywood and you know, and Oscars and stuff like that, and and but you
I mean,
know,
I still want one, but
of course, we all want one.
then I'm gonna put.
We all, you know, I personally would love to, you know, live in DC, New York, or LA, provided that I'm wealthy and affluent, not when I'm on
There you
the.
go. That's the one where it's tough. Unless you got a few awards and a chunk of cash, it's awfully hard to. Yeah, it's harder to be a starving artist now than it was when I was in my 20s. It was a lot easier.
But then, but that's a perfect segue to, and of course, obviously, you know, that office place bullying, the everyday sexism that that woman of all ages, of all looks, of all, you know, different, you know, gender, you know, identities, from the
Yeah.
non-binary to those who are to those who are transitioning, you know, the everyday sexism is still very volatile and alive in you know, and alive and well, to to the point. I remember Alternet was reporting that like in science departments and history departments, and you know, in so many, you know, blue collar jobs, there, you know, there was systemic, you know, sexual abuse and you know, and sexual assaults, that took place. And then, you know, as someone who has worked in media, in media, then I have to ask, you know, this, you know, $1 million question, which is, do you think media, particular film and TV and music, you know, glorifies violent masculinity and machismo culture? And if so, what examples, you know, come to mind?
Well, yes, obviously, some of it 100% does. And I don't think that inherently is anything wrong with that, like showing how it is to them in their mind or whatever. It's, to me, it's, you know, in some way, everything is art and everything is expression. And if, you know, I'd rather understand how people see that than, and be able to like go through it. It's like sad songs.
Yeah.
Like, you don't, you're not really that sad, but you sometimes want to be, I think that there's never been going to be a time where our art doesn't have violence in it,
Mm-hmm.
because we haven't stopped committing violence on a worldwide scale. Like, I think if, you know, we're going to keep having war movies that win Oscars if we keep having wars.
Exactly.
And, you know, we're going to keep having movies about people of color having to struggle or dying because it keeps happening. So
Yeah.
to me, it's like, well, I could say like, there's very little science that has ever come out that said that, watching violent this or playing violent video games makes a person like, I'm pretty sure like ROTC does a perfectly good job of getting someone to want to go shoot a gun at other people.
Yeah.
Much better than a video game. But there's always this question of, chicken or the egg. I would like to see less war movies, ultimately because I'd like to see less war. And I think until we realize that there are other stories out there, and as you're talking about like things for women, and there's just a million things that we're learning now and we're finally talking about that our mothers and our grandmothers and everybody couldn't talk about. And men are understanding things that they were never told. Like patriarchy hurts men too. I can say that a million times, but I feel like it's never enough.
Yes,
Like
yes. I've never been in a relationship, but I've had girls, reject me, and then the thing was, it's like you're too nice, or other people say, dude, you gotta like buff yourself up, you gotta like like work out and be like more like macho, or you gotta be like an asshole to girls, and the whole the whole good girls like bad boys and stuff like that. So patriarchy and violent masculinity does badly impact men.
yeah.
Yeah. I completely agree with that statement you said.
Yeah, because I mean, I haven't checked the numbers lately, but I'm gonna guess though that like men tend to kill women more often than they kill each other.
Yeah.
And so I think there's sort of there's an understanding, not that it never happens, but you understand like when you look at the bulk of violent crimes, people against people, and who are those people?
It's often
and
women,
women,
and it's often women, and of course, I often say that hatred is a big uniting factor. So if you look
Mhm.
at like the Israeli electorate, they all band together
Yes,
to like hate on Palestinians. When it comes to like the Trump cult followers, they all band
yes,
together because they want to bash a couple of like Mexicans,
right,
that is legal or otherwise.
yeah,
White supremacy is
Tyrel,
hell of a drug, and I believe it's also the same thing with with men. I mean, we're not even nice to each other the way we
right.
slaughter one
Oh my god,
another over turfs and stuff like that. Gang violence, mob wars, and yeah, but certainly when it comes to like uniting to put women in their place or put queer people in their place, yeah.
yeah. There's always this sort of, I feel like we're in the last, like in the death rattle of the past thinking, and there's this tiny little contingent that are just grasping, they want it to stay because it's like, I just want two genders because it's complicated. I'm like, it's not that complicated, Joyce, Gloria.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not that,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
really not. It's just called like not being an asshole. And I think that's the thing. It's like, well, you know, it, well, so and so, and they always name like some. He's like Don Rickles wouldn't be able to do his show right now, and I'm like, yeah,
Yeah, he
no,
wouldn't because his stuff was fucking racist as hell. And as a matter of fact, like my father was like showing me, like my father was like, dude, if Don Rickles was alive today, I don't think he would
he
survive
wouldn't.
in this political climate. I was like, what are you
No,
talking about? And then like he showed me like Don Rickles like making fun of like Native Americans, saying to somebody in the audience, play an Indian, making fun of their language and everything. And I said to myself, wow, that's like where I draw the limit. Like there's only so many like racist jokes I can tolerate, but there's enough like black
right,
people that's gonna like beat the shit out of like a white
right,
racist that's like recycling that. But like I draw the limit at like Native Americans. Like that's like you don't do that.
right.
Like they're the most like marginalized. Like
Like, how do you
why?
not know that? They're like the first. They're the first marginalized people of this country.
We were founded on marginalization, and they were the first. I completely completely agree with
So
you.
I think, yeah, I think there's we aren't at the place intellectually where I think we can completely separate people's actions or people's political motivations from the art that they make or that the art that they're in or that they do. I think it can, but I just think there's going to be stuff that we're not going to watch 10 times again. It's not going to happen. And I think that there's sort of this thing about cancel culture, which I don't really like. What canceled? Louis C.K. won a fucking Grammy. Do I care? If oh no, cancel culture. Yeah, it seems to be really rough. Polanski got an Oscar.
Bill and Bill Maher still has a show on HBO. So where's the cancel culture?
It's just like, it's a way to make money. It's be like, oh my God, I'm going to say something brash and then I'm going to get canceled for it. And I'm like, and you think you're like Lenny Bruce by doing this? No, that's incorrect. That is not how that works. It's not even what they did at the time. Like, they're trying to take comedy, classic comedians who really spoke on things in a way that in the 90s or in the 80s or the 70s wasn't talked about like that. And they made changes for people because they brought shit up. I don't know that being like, oh no, I can't make fun of trans people or I get canceled. And then I make a Netflix special about how I got canceled and how trans people are and everything else. And I'm like, it's not that rough for you, okay? It's not that rough for you all out there.
Exactly.
Speak
the truth, Ms. Wallace. That's so true. I mean, and then my problem, my problem with the whole, people who bitterly complain about, identity politics, or people who say, oh, like, we can't make a joke about, a woman's ass anymore, or like, why can't we make fun of like trans people? I just, for me, it's like, well, you're such a smart person. You do comedy. Why can't you just use that wonderful intellect that you have and just mock Joe Biden, like mock like Obama, mock
down.
Mock the powerful, like mock the powerful. It's way like I mean, why do you have to marginalize people who are already marginalized, people who are already having a difficult time just existing as it is, like women, queer people. So I don't shed. For me, this is the world's smallest violin playing for people who are going like, boo hoo hoo, cancel culture.
Canceled. Yeah, I'm sort of like, oh no. And then I just find that the people that are the most angry about it are my age, and I am embarrassed as hell to be in that age group because, like, you are a middle-aged white man or you're a middle-aged woman. Yeah. And I have pink hair and tattoos and swear a lot and like whatever, that's beside the point. But like, there's a way to act when you get to a certain age where you need to start listening to the people that are younger than you, especially when it comes to politics, or you get in this like generational like time loop where you're trying to be like, but in my day. And so many of at least women I know that are like Gen Xers or elder millennials, that like weird 80 or late 70s, early 80s kind of kids
tend to be self-sexist. They actually tend to be self-sexist, and the kind of people who bizarrely enough vote for the far right Republican Party or very centrist Democrats that don't want to rock the boats.
Right. Incremental change, they called it in the 90s. It's incremental, and I'm like, it's 20 fucking years later. How many increments could there possibly be in giving people health care and a decent living and roads and bridges that don't collapse? Just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
Like, it's been a while. Like, I'm already old. And you're telling me the same.
But a quick follow-up before I go to my other question then is, so when we talk about like violent masculinity and machismo in popular culture, so do you think we're that the days of still rappers having lots of girls in their bikini dancing around, or the kind of like Motley Crue type of stuff of girls stripping and stuff like that, we're still going to see that, but when it comes to like Eminem's song 97 Bonnie and Clyde or Kim, where he's talking about like murdering his wife for having the audacity to cheat on him, like are we going to see less of that, but still the occasional soft pornography that we see on MTV with with so many talented pop female artists. There are so many great female pop artists, pop EDM artists, but they're all like dancing in their underwears or scantily clad and stuff like that. And I'm curious, what do you think of, you know, the Beyoncés of the world, or Dua Lipa, Charlie XCX, and so many other talented artists who are engaging in this kind of menstrual show of stripping and whatnot?
Right. Well, I think because we've been so shamed for everything. And again, it goes back to my point of feeling like I shouldn't tell people what kind of art they can make or what they can express, how they feel about whatever. I do find it hopeful that what I'm seeing there are videos with girls in bikinis,
Yeah.
but it's two women singing the song about feeling good about yourself. And I think there is certain this idea that we had such a big, like they used to call it the pornification in the 90s and 2000s, where like every girl went to the tanning booth and got the little Playboy thing, and you wore the Victoria's Secret, and it was all very like outwardly sexual in a way, but very commodified.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was, you're wearing, you know, Victoria's Secret sweatpants with pink across your butt, and that it was all like, nobody knows. We know. I'm like, everybody knows. There's no secret. But I think because of that, we learned a lot about how we were being sold to. It's like we woke up and went, oh shit. And a whole bunch of, you know, nieces, nephews, daughters, sons are being taught by a next generation about like, this is fine, but do it because you feel good about yourself, not because you want someone else to feel good about you. Where I think our generations or earlier generations, like 70s and 80s, we were taught like, you're gross, but you know, love yourself first. That was our shitty therapy. It was like, you're never going to be like the girls in this magazine, but here's 5 tips to help with your self-confidence.
Okay, interesting. I never thought of it like that.
Yeah, it's a really messed up world. I have like 5 or 6 documentaries in my head already about how to like piece it apart from all the things that have been through our culture in the last 20 years. And I think just having been grown, and just I feel like because I grew up in a very specific time. I was born in 1977, so I grew up in the rise of the serial killer.
Oh my God! Yeah, Jesus, yeah.
Like
Freddy, Jason, Michael, Pinheads.
You know, then
Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Yeah, those.
Psycho, like all of it. It's like I grew up in that world where that was on the news, and then the movies that I watched and everything else. It didn't make me a serial killer. Although I always feel if there is a serial killer anywhere operating in an area I feel like they're going to come talk to me. But I'll be like, no, I didn't do that.
Forbid.
Yeah, I'm like, no, it's too much work. To me, I'm like, I can hire a team to do that, but I'm not dragging a body. Like, forget it. It's too much work. I got other things to do.
But that's an example of, you know, of us glorifying violence, because I mean, when I do watch those movies, which I try to avoid because I can't stand violence towards a woman, but when I do watch those movies, I'm hoping that like you know that the serial killer does die, you know, in the end. But apparently others are actually cheering for the kill and stuff like that. Which is why, you know, when we talk about the over sexualization of of women, I don't mind the occasional, you know, Janet Jackson or or whoever, Camila Cabello, you know, Anne Marie and so forth like that, you know, dancing and showing how sexy they are. My problem is when is when there's an excess of that, when it's just too like excessive, and you know, you turn on MTV nowadays, and it is basically like soft pornography. And I thought feminists like the Jane Fondas of the world were against that, that kind of over sexualization, but they say that they like Miley Cyrus even though she's practically naked and, you know, when she's twerking and all of that. So your thoughts on
but
that?
I think that's the thing is I think we grew up in a being told, what you wear will decide how the world treats you.
Hmm.
And I think we hit a point where we were like, okay, planes are falling from the sky. There's a plague. They're probably going to take away our healthcare. And you're worried about whether my titties are out.
That's very fair counter argument. Yeah.
It's sort of like in the grand scheme of things, I don't think young women showing their body or expressing themselves in any way is harmful at all. I think young men need to learn how to control themselves, and I think we need to stop making everything this idea that just because someone is showing skin it's sexual, just because someone is doing whatever it's sexual. But if it is, that's kind of fine. That's how we reproduce. It's just a thing. Like, you're not going to make sexuality go away. And I think people are just more honest and learning that they can find a way to be more comfortable in their sexuality, whatever it is, which is going to lead to a lot of people feeling very uncomfortable, because it is. It's for one minute you're like, I don't need a push-up bra. And then like 10 years later, we're all like, of course it's a push-up bra. You should see it. I got it on Amazon. Look at it. Look at it. Like, it's a very, but we're a
Interesting.
very messed up generations of people that I think we have a much more honest look at it. But I think what needs to happen within like movies and fiction and things like that is you need people making movies about violence against women, like Get Out. In this, like what that did for African Americans and Black folks, that to me is like when you can show make people actually feel the fucking horror of these situations. And like in real life, like they don't have to be the actual murderers. It's horrible situations that people are put into because of, what oppressed group they happen to be in. And I feel like that's part of what women need to do, where in past generations, the women who said, well, if the men don't stop killing us, we're going to kill them right back. Okay, they were kind of serious. We're saying it in this way of, don't make us.
Yeah.
Just kidding. But I can't promise the next generation won't. This is your last chance. After this, you're on your own. Like, I feel like I have tried and tried, and so many of us.
Yes, we do need to make more spaces for women writers, women stories. I'm completely for that, and I personally love it. I personally love when I personally love it when a female is a protagonist, when a female is a lead in a television show, and I love love stories from from the female point of view. I'm not pervert when I say I love lesbian stories, because I just find out women characters are very interesting, and and the same sex relationships of women is just very interesting, because it's basically like when you're analyzing from afar female friendships, but here it is in a romantic setting. But going back to toxic masculinity, then I have to ask you then this question, because I know when you were on Watching the Hawks, you were an outspoken supporter of the Me Too moment or Me Too movement. Now, my only criticisms of Me Too and a lot of the men who have been accused of sexual assault and whatnot is the kind of social media vigilantism and the very tabloid driven nature of Me Too. And because I'm a big believer in innocence until proven guilty. And surely, isn't there a way we can address the epidemic of sexism, toxic masculinity, and sexual assaults on campus, the military, or Hollywood, but still conserve innocence until proven guilty?
Right? Like our general justice system, kind of the basics. I do agree that there's a better way for us to handle this, and there is a point where, I think sometimes, in some cases, just that people are telling you they don't agree with you or they think you're trash. I don't feel like that's like the worst thing in the world. I think when you get to the point of like doxing and getting people, kicked out of their job and stuff, and a lot of times that's not true. Like they do, internet spies or internet detectives don't always get it right, but also cable news and tabloids don't always get it right.
Exactly.
And that's, it goes back to my earlier thing of, I don't like the cable news. It doesn't give you time to think about what's going on. I never got to research anything nearly long enough to have to talk about it. They tend to just rush to just, well, that's what we heard. That's what we're doing. We're just reporting what everybody's throwing at us.
Yeah.
And I think that in that like space, you can really mess up people's lives that had nothing to do with anything. And what happens is then the really bad guys use that as an excuse to get out of jail or get whatever. It's, well, obviously it's just a internet whatever, and I'm being railroaded and blah blah blah, and people believe some really shitty people. But I think that it has to do with the whole tabloid media world. I think it's trash.
Yeah.
Like infotainment makes me, it's not.
Yeah, exactly.
I would rather sit and say, I think that we're in a better position. Like, people like to pretend as if everybody under 50 is like, they can't watch anything more than 3 minutes. I'm like, watch me binge watch a 10-part documentary.
Exactly. And like, have you seen the people who watch Joe Rogan's program? He got the guy has 4-hour-long interviews, 3-hour-long interviews. Trust me, there is a hunger for people to watch, like, interesting, intense conversations and whatnot.
Yeah. And so I think we're moving into a thing where people will learn a lot more through things like that, of, documentaries, a more documentary based news gathering and story gathering, because, someone on the news can only tell you so much. It's great for the traffic on the 10 is a little slow tonight and it might rain later. That's great. It's not helpful in educating people and giving people a whole picture of what's going on, because it's like, you have 30 seconds to tell them what the entire story is. No, it's not a 30-second story.
Exactly. And I remember, when we think about the Julian Assange, trial, I remember, John Pilger often says in his speeches that, that we don't live in an information age, we live in a media age. We have trial by media, jury by media. Yeah. Julian Assange is guilty, Michael Jackson's guilty, and we have, lynch mob by media, such and such a Me Too, such and such a Me Too thing, to the point, but that doesn't change the fact that there is, like, systemic sexism and toxic masculinity in our military. No surprise. In our campuses, that's just disgusting that there's no justice ever served. Mm-hmm. And of course, any entertainment world. I'm not saying that the Harvey Weinsteins don't exist, but not everyone is a Harvey Weinstein. That right. That the social media vigilantes say, burn the person, at the stake. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that comes from being raised, like multiple generations being raised on the National Enquirer and,
E-entertainment and stuff like that.
Exactly. Like, that became so important. And I don't even blame the Kardashians, because I think they just, someone gave me that much money at that time to do whatever, I would have done it too. I would have absolutely taken that opportunity. Stupid. Anybody is like, I would never. I'm like, if you knew how much they were making, you'd understand why they did it and why they had to keep getting paid so much more to keep doing it, because it's torturous. It's not good for mental health to be in those situations. And I think the thing is, fame and celebrity became something that was accessible to everybody now, and I think that's messed up some people who could live in the shadows, who could kind of keep a shitty culture of the way men were treated and the way men were, because Harvey, for all of the shit, the way he treated women, I watched that man take another man by the throat and push him against a wall.
Wow.
Over God knows what stupid shit is going on. But like, that that's also toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
It's this idea that they can't talk to each other about their feelings, that it's okay to be, like that, because in the movie and media business, it has been people like Harvey, and it's been people like, all of the creepy media men that have come out, and it's been proven that they were, just I mean, it's like, you have so much, there's services for that.
Yeah, and then and then the other problem is, oh, are you still there? Ms. Wallace, you still there? Tabetha, are you still there? What's going on? Hey, oh, are you back there? Okay, perfect. You're back there.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, but yeah, you were saying.
Yeah, I was like, it's I think what bothers me the most is you have people who are incredibly rich, and they spend a lot of time privatizing their life, making it not in public view, and calculating and making sure when stuff does get out, it gets shaped in the way that they want, so the narrative is great. And yet they will not spend money on consensual sex workers who would do all these things.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I remember talking, with my father and other people, and we thought Harvey Weinstein was one of the richest, most powerful film producers in the world, who got countless Oscars, or his movies certainly got countless Oscars. Why did he not just order an escort or a prostitute? Especially because, his ties to the deep state, you would have thought that well, anywho. We're having a problem again. Are you there, Tabetha? Oh. Okay, wait. Are you there?
Is that
okay? Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, for some. Okay. Anyways, but yeah, long story short, yeah, Harvey Weinstein, the dumbass should have just ordered an escort, but whatever.
I'm just like, this is my thing. It's like my answer to things, and that's what I mean. That's hard about like cable news and the general entertainment world of news and infotainment and just news in general, media, is that we take these like really small slices of things, and there's a much bigger story behind it, and it's so easy to just latch on to something about being just about women, or just about whatever, or just about an oppressed group, or just about any of it. I think the reason that the government and shitty forces within it and without it are able to fuck around is because they've got us fighting each other over the dumbest shit, over flags. Who fuck cares about a flag? I mean,
yeah. Well, that's interesting, Ms. Wallace, because I thought with your support of the Me Too that you were very much that you're more fundamentalist, like anyone who's accused, just cancel them. But no, you actually have more or less a very objective approach to how we deal with systemic sexual abuse. And but then do you think that all that being said, that we can still that somebody like a Roman Polanski or a Woody Allen or an R.Kelly, that they can still go to jail, but we can still appreciate the music and the films or the arts that they did do, or even Marilyn Manson, who I personally think is innocent, but we'll see when the trial, as long as innocent until proven guilty. Innocent until proven guilty, but if he is found guilty of of whatever he's of accused of, can we still enjoy the music? But if we do know somebody that was a victim of his, or we do know somebody that is very sensitive about sexual abuse because of trauma, we just don't play
around
the
that. Yeah,
R.Kelly or the Polanski movie when they're around, right?
I feel like that's a very easy way to handle it, because this idea like, well, I can't do this thing. I'm like, just not in front of people that are bothered by it. Like, don't play Marilyn Manson if your friend's like, but I feel like that's just being a nice person. Like, we used to just be like, oh, don't talk to politics about this, and he gets all upset. We just don't want all the drama. It's not because they have some like deep political view. It's often just because like somebody's unhappy with their life and they want to argue, or they want to blame it on somebody else, and you're going to be in the crossfire of it. And that's how they've made the $8 argument on CNN with, people yelling at each other, because they're like, do this. It keeps you nice and sedate. And then guys never really talk to each other about how they're actually taking every last little group. And it doesn't matter if you're white. They're going to get you too. Like, that's
Exactly. And that's a perfect segue, changing subject for a bit. That's a perfect segue into this question, which is, which is the Second Amendment. And now you've covered and compared Australian gun culture with American culture. That was a very good documentary you and Tyrel Ventura did, for Watching the Hawks. But sadly, is the US doomed to not ever have sensible gun control laws because of the Second Amendment? Because I think Australia or any other country is able to pass sensible gun laws because they don't have the Second Amendment, which everyone thinks came from God and it's infallible. You can never change it.
I mean, we had an amendment so women could vote and that people weren't property and stuff. I'm pretty sure we can make changes. My biggest problem with the way that the Second Amendment is applied within law is it's incredibly sexist and racist and horrible, and that's how you
Hold on.
that we have now, where you don't get a day without a mass shooting.
Yeah.
Hey, I know I think the Zoom is like, I'm tired. Sorry.
Well, Zoom, drink a Red Bull. We're almost done, and we'll go much faster if you stop interrupting us like this.
I know.
Anyway, no, but you were saying about the Second Amendment that, I mean, we should be able to have a rational discussion and amend the Second Amendment to make it very clear the Second Amendment is for to do, or if we're that immature about it, we just repeal it, but we just make sure that people, your thoughts.
I believe that it's the Second Amendment guns thing is going to happen because state by state places will make it more restricted as younger folks are coming into office, and some of these older more right-leaning gun nuts. I mean, I grew up around guns. I just didn't grow up around the people who were like obsessed with them.
Yeah.
And so I'm always a little like, I mean, I'm country. I come from a town of 1,200 people in the middle of Wisconsin. I know what guns. It's normal. I get that.
Hunting, right? Big hunting culture, right?
Yeah, and actually, like half my family bow hunts, so it's not even like we're just not that. We're not gun. There's no gun nuts in my family in that way. But I grew up around a lot of them. And I've always found it very odd that you feel like you're gonna, like, it's not Red Dawn, okay? It's not gonna be Wolverines with a 22 and we're gonna defeat the Russians and the Cubans. Like, it's kind of silly. They have drones. If the government wants to drone on, like, they want to just like shut up, they can do that. And that gun is not going to make a difference. However, the fact that you have that gun means that someone in your family is about 10 to 20 times more likely to kill themselves with it.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious why all these other safety issues and things that come with owning weapons and wandering around in public places with them, which is my thing. I'm like, then keep it on your own property. You can have all the, you can have a ton of guns. Just why do you have to go to Target with it?
Exactly.
It's Target.
Well, here's hope. Well, but at the same time, I mean, if a Bernie Sanders or a Dr. Jill Stein or even some modest libertarian was to say, I have an idea how to solve the gun violence epidemic, why don't we just repeal the Second Amendment? Their political career would be over in a nanosecond.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I don't think you can repeal
this is why I think America is doomed when it comes to at least the issue of guns. And there's just no point in like even talking to people about sensible gun laws because, yeah, guys, it's not going to happen. The British are never going to want to be part of the European Union, and America's never going to want to get rid of their guns.
It's true. It is. It's that thing where I think it's very generational, and I think in 20 years we'll see a very different world because people with much bolder ideas about the future and a little bit more positive aspect on life and a positive view of what can be done and what's possible. I think those people are going to take power very soon, and we're going to get out of the incremental change and the bring it back to 1950 or 1850 even.
Well, yeah, one can only hope,
Yeah.
One can only hope,
It's the secret. It's what the secret is, right? You just like keep visualizing it and keep putting it in the universe, and eventually it happens. But there was also a Doctor Who episode where they all said Doctor Who at the same time, and that saved the universe. So I'm just saying.
But in that same special report that you and Tyrel did, you did a follow-up documentary where you both explored the institutional racism Aboriginal people of Australia face. And given the stark similarities of the apartheid both Indigenous peoples suffer from, did it make you and your colleague Tyrel more conscious of the plight of Native Americans when you got back home and wanting to address that criminally overlooked human rights issue in the U.S.?
I think what drove me and American issues for so long. Did I break up?
Yes. So you're saying that you and Tyrel, what drove you?
What drove us to actually do the Australian piece, which was Beauty in the Struggle, First Nations of Australia, was because we had covered so much from the Native American community and because we had interviewed so many people about it. And between what we knew about the African American community, the Cuban community, the Puerto Rican community, like learning more really specifically about all of them, it just became like, this is clearly the same thing. Like we're in this same boat. Like they did this same, colonizers will colonize. And that means it's going to happen, which means institutionally we need to make changes. And that either means, changing certain institutions, getting rid of some, or, rethinking how government relates to people, thinking about how our tax money and how socialist do you go, and maybe it's a mix of everything. But I don't think we can get to that point until we've realized that it's not about Trump or Biden or any weird cult personality kind of thing. That's not gonna. We're not gonna be saved by a personality. We're not. Nobody. It's not gonna be one person. It's not gonna be the one leader, the one thing that makes everybody. I don't think it's not about a person.
So before you did those two fantastic documentaries on Australia, you guys had already covered a lot of the plight of Native Americans then.
Mm-hmm.
So then that leads to this question, which is what? Yeah, it's sort of a two parts. So part one is, why do you think the plight of Native Americans is so criminally overlooked? And why do you think it doesn't get as much attention as the plight of Mexican Americans, Puerto Ricans, Black Americans, when we talk about Black Lives Matter, or heteronormativity or sexism? Like, why do you think like the plight of Native Americans doesn't get the level of attention they get? And do you think it's because that confronting the original sin, which is settler colonialism, and the fact that you know all of the privileges that we all have, the working class, the middle class, and the upper class, whites, and the melting pot culture, is because of the theft and the dispossession of Native American land. And once you really start digging into that, you can't really go America, fuck yeah, and and God bless America, and like America, like yeah. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know, if we were still England, we'd probably have socialized healthcare. So and free education, just saying, or at least affordable education. So I'm like, well, no, that's all great. I think one of the main reasons is that the last 20 to 40, even 50 years of education and going back has taught so many myths that Native American people don't exist anymore, that they died out. There are people that believe this, that they believe that, they have different organs, they have different this, or that they want to be, and oh, well, they have casinos, and that's because they want to have meth and they want to have all of this. And you're like, nobody wants that. You gave them the worst pieces of land.
Mm-hmm.
And then you made their votes count for next to nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And you're still bitching about it because you want that land back. And the truth is, we should be giving more land back to them before they give anything back. I'm like, maybe someplace with clean water and we don't let people dirty it. I'm just saying, it's a thing of being like, when you tell people the myths of it was all friendly at the first Thanksgiving and they had a turkey, like everything was cool, it's because they made friends with each other, and you sort of mythologize this whole idea of America and its birth and the pioneering ways of and I'm like, yeah, it was a lot of people with guns.
Yeah. Wait 1 second.
They murdered a lot of people that aren't white.
Yeah, exactly. If I heard you correctly, if I heard you correctly, you were saying that that this country was founded by a lot of people with guns who were basically just massacring people, right?
Right, and taking whatever land was in front of them. So it was a free for all in their sense. The idea was, well, it doesn't belong to anybody else, so I'll just take it. And this was on huge scales. It built entire industries. It built entire dynasties and legacies. That's why we have, Carnegie Hall and shit. Like, made some of the richest people ever was colonizing America and going out to work on railroads and whatever and make a fortune. And
but then what's it going to take for I don't have much hope for the corporate media, but what's it going to take for left-leaning outlets? And you've spoken with some of the best independent left-leaning journalists during your time on Watching the Hawks. Even RT itself spent a lot of time covering Native issues. Your documentaries were fantastic. Abby Martin, when she did Breaking the Set, did a beautiful like 2-part episode about the plight of Native Americans. So what's it going to take then for much of the left-leaning outlets to go, okay, it's time we address settler colonialism? If Canada's dealing with this issue, New Zealand has gotten to a point where race relations are better with their Indigenous people, the Maori, and Australia. I mean, the Black Lives Matter actually should be called the Native Lives Matter movement because it's about the plight of Indigenous people. So what's it going to take for the American left and the people power movements here to say, okay, yeah,
it's important enough. I pitched stories. I mean, the stories that I got on there about Native Americans, American Indians, culture, Indigenous people around the world, and First Nations peoples, I probably got about 20% of what I pitched up on screen.
Really?
Yeah.
So
like
even
what
on
you yeah
so even on RT, which actually did a fairly good job of covering the plight of Native Americans, even there it was tough to make that number one issue that we should be covering and
yeah.
yeah.
It would be that thing of, oh, you've done like 3 stories about them in the last month, and I'm like, well, like trans Black women were being murdered in like 2016 or so, like every other day. I got told to stop doing that story because when someone else would die, because like there's nothing new. Oh, no, it's just a
Wow.
new dead body. No big deal. So yeah, I would say maybe 20% when it came to that. It was like, if it didn't get enough clicks, if it didn't feel controversial, it wasn't going to get a ton. And I think that's the thing that independent media and journalists and storytellers have to be really wary of, is leaning into that. Well, I'll get the clicks, I'll get the followers, I'll say these things and I'll be loud about it, or I'll be angry about it. You can't do that forever.
Yeah.
You can't sustain that level of anger, and you can't sustain that level of finding things wrong with everything and not being able to have it. You just turned into Fox News and everything we hated, because now it's just a bunch of people screaming at each other. Or they only want to sit and talk to people, or it's people talking to only people they agree with. And it's like, well, there it is. That's what happens when you make it such a toxic environment, which I just feel like the media, news, and all of that, like we have to get to a point where we understand things a little better and take the time to learn about things before we decide to be outraged about them. And I think, the more you work in television, or the more you work in certain places, you're going to get the sort of fame thing. You're going to get you're going to get people around you telling you like, oh, you've done that story, or you've done this. You just have to be annoying, and just, if you're doing it yourself, do it yourself. Then who cares? What are they going to do? Like I said,
Interesting.
like what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Like honestly, in most things I'm like, okay, you're talking.
Oh wait, hold up.
What's the worst that's going to happen?
Oh wait, actually, can you say
Sorry.
that again? Yeah, there's another cutoff. Yeah, can you say that again?
Good. Oh God, what was I saying? Shoot.
That you're going to have to be more that folks are going to have to be more persistent when it comes to getting stories like the plight of Native Americans onto the agenda.
Right. I think people have to stop being afraid, and the self-censorship, I think, is far more toxic and far more dangerous to journalism and everything else. The self-censorship is is the problem. It's, I think it begins and ends there. And especially as independent journalists, you shouldn't be, feeding into anybody. You shouldn't be editing yourself for anybody. And who cares? Maybe you say something that people don't like. What's the worst that's going to happen? They're going to mention it on the internet. Okay.
Yeah. well, it's.
I didn't get poisoned by the Russians, so obviously you can go pretty far and say some pretty sassy things, even to Putin, and not get poisoned. So I say go for it. Just go for it. Like, who cares? But you have to be bold if you're going to be in that position. Otherwise, don't complain about nobody's paying attention in this, and why am I not getting this? Okay, then do something that's not like every single other person out there.
But then that also means that that media companies, even ones that focus on the plight of Black people, or the plight of queer people, or the plight of women, or all workers, magazines, do you think that they should be seeking out then more voices of Native Americans to tell their stories? Because it's also important that we give space that they tell their stories, rather than the kind of white white person savior and trying to guilt other people to covering the plight of Native Americans, or somebody like myself who's a Black person but cares a lot about the plight of Native Americans.
It's one of those things where we have to, representation actually does matter. When it's forced, it doesn't work. And I think there's been a ton of times where white people mostly, when you really look into it, it's white producers or directors that, wherever it is, will sort of put something in that they don't fully understand, or they'll put a couple of writers in a room and then do it without really getting a full idea of the culture and who these people are in that. And you can see that in the fact that there is, I think, one television show right now on that's about Native people, like a fictional TV show. I think there's one. It's Reservation Dogs. That's the only show I know of that is about any North American Indigenous.
And again, it's in Canada, in which I go out of my way to myth bust Canada and say that Canada is not this wonderful socialist liberal utopia we make it out to be. But in Canada, give credit where credit is due. They are way more advanced in talking about the plight of Indigenous people and making that part of the consciousness, where prime ministers have to debate what are you going to do about racism towards Indigenous people, and what does your party's platform say about lands back and stuff like that. And I want that to happen in the United States, because it's because it's just ridiculous how. And
I think that's like, you can have a show, and I think it's also looking at different art or different content in a different way. I love the show Yellowstone because I like watching white people get fucked with after they stole a bunch of land from, it's not because I like all the characters, it's because they actually do address it. And to some extent, it's and I'm hoping the prequel series to that as well, because we're talking about covered wagons, putting a stake down and deciding that's yours in a world that before then, owning land wasn't even a thing. And it was barely a thing in England at the time. So owning land and owning property and owning a place, they sort of colonization created this idea that you could put a flag down and say, I own that. But then nobody wants to steward it. Nobody wants to take care of it. No one wants to be really taking care of it. It's just, let's use as much of it up.
You're saying
in a lot of areas.
But you're saying about colonization. Let's use as much of this up, and then we got cut off again.
Oh yeah. So I think the problem with colonization is that you have this thing of ownership, and then you have this idea that instead of protecting what you have, what you take ownership of, instead of stewarding what you have ownership of, you just want to pillage as much as you can and see how much money you can make from it or something. And I think that's a very American, that comes from colonization. And in Australia, you see the same thing. And, I'm not against people making money. That's awesome. I wish more people made more money. That's the idea. Yeah. But you can't do that on a very selfish timetable. I mean, even America's great fathers of industry, by the end, realize that you can't, I fucked up. Whoops, sorry. I'm gonna go build a bunch of libraries and hospitals.
Exactly. We have a finite world. We have a finite resources, and ironically enough, it was the Indigenous people who were saying there is a tomorrow. You don't have to eat everything today. And
we call all the buffalo, and we're like, no, we're gonna do all of it. Yeah,
that's interesting what what you said, Ms. Wallace. But it sounds to me as if first we need to break the silence, then we need to say to people they still exist, and there needs to be, if we ever do a solidarity campaign, the first thing I would want Indigenous people to to say in their campaign is, we still exist. then this is still our land, and and listen to our plight. On top of the fact that like independent journalists have to be much more persistent in saying, hey, this may not be as sexy as a topic as Black Lives Matter or Palestine justice, but this is an important human rights issue. I would argue even the most important one of our time, which is like, the plight of Native Americans.
Yeah, we have to turn the bus around. We have to do that. And right now, I think a lot of us are like pulling on the wheel, and like I said, that last gasp of the death rattle of former ways of thinking, and thinking that, I'm a good person because I go to church on Sunday and whatever. It's like, that's not what makes a good person. Like, I think we're slowly getting rid of the idea that Jesus is there so I don't do bad things. You could just not, if you don't need that, to maybe you should just be a better person.
Exactly.
Because that's actually what Jesus said. I have 8 years of religious education. That is actually what he said. He was like, you should just be nice to each other and don't let cults and shit make you crazy and do bad things. Ha ha ha. Ironically, now we have the cults of Jesus and mega churches and the Catholic Church who is responsible. I don't know if you know this, like these are the kind of stories that I don't understand why you wouldn't be doing this, but this is the kind of story that I would never be able to get on the air, is especially in Canada, is that there are over 10,000 children's bodies have been found in mass graves at Catholic schools and religious schools, Catholic schools specifically, all across. It's 10,000. And the idea that people don't, I'm sorry, that's like a PTSD response for me. It's not a hiccup, but like, no problem, it actually like makes me so angry. It's how my body keeps from just being like,
no worries, no worries, take your time.
The fact that I have never seen that story talked about. It's like, I don't care that and then I'm sorry, please look into this, everybody watching this, when after you watch this, please look up the 10,000 kids in the Catholic Church. The Pope, I think, came to Canada recently, or met with Canadians.
He's planning on coming when it's my 33rd, my 32nd or 33rd birthday, July 26th.
Oh, nice. So
see, I'm already having senior moments. I like Blink-182. What's my age again?
I know it is. Like, those songs make so much more sense now. You're like, yeah.
But yeah, you were saying that.
But yes, so the Pope met with some representatives from Canada and from their Indigenous people. And I don't know who thought this was a good idea, but they gave the Pope, or they're planning on giving the Pope a
tour.
I don't know what the word is, and so it's different in every like tribe and everything else. So I don't want to say the wrong thing, but it's essentially like the baby carrier that you see. To the Pope of the church. They gave a child's baby carrier to the head of the church that is responsible for 10,000 at least. And we know it's way more than that because they did the same thing here with residential schools. So it's like, there's a lot of stories.
Well, yeah, exactly. And then on top of that, like, the murder and the mistreatment of Indigenous people, that's only tip of the iceberg, because in Ireland, where the Catholic Church has run roughshod since independence from the British, or partial independence because of the situation in Northern Ireland, there were women who were slut shamed, girls who had girls who, because the Catholic Church doesn't do contraception and stuff like that, you had many young girls that had teenage pregnancy, gave birth to kids out of wedlock, and their children were stolen from them, and many of them died in those awful conditions because you should have you're having problems with childbirth, you should have thought of that before you had sex before marriage. And And there's
Right.
mass,
And
grave sites of what they call
yeah,
the Magdalene Aslims and stuff like that.
yes, I was gonna say that it's the story of Magdalene's. It's the same thing. They like threw babies into wells and then told people they had been adopted. Like they're just it's the same
My
thing. I'm like,
God. Oh, that. Oh, I didn't even know that. I thought it was just like kids dying from childbirth or kids. But no, actual murder. My God.
they're like straight up. There were stories about, well, if a kid came in that was, say, biracial, you think the Catholic Church was going to go like adopt a biracial baby out?
Wow.
No. Anybody, any child that was born with any disability, and that's like the 50s and 60s. Like it's not that far away from us. And that's my thing. I'm like, we have to just stamp out these old way of thinking and look at things differently than our forefathers did.
But
They
then
didn't get everything right.
but then my second to last question is confronting the plight of Native Americans so like because that will smash anyone's narcissism, anyone's patriotism, and the idea that America can be reformed. Like is it because when you really do watch like a documentary or two or three on the plight of Native Americans, or when you actually physically go to reservations and see how Gandhi once said that like violence is the worst for no that poverty is the worst form of violence, and when you see that in reservations, you can't help but just weep and say, I am no longer proud to be an American, and we need to give radical justice back. Just having a Bill of Rights or signing Native Americans into civil rights legislation is not that doesn't even get to the amount of justice and compensation Indigenous folk get, right?
I mean, I don't know that we can ever pay back that injustice. I don't know that we can ever, there are enough reparations to be made for slavery or for the complete slaughter of the Indigenous people of North America for two countries to fight over. And Mexico, throw in there, you have a whole bunch of Indigenous people there, and they had a bunch of like Spanish white people coming in and deciding they were going to fight over land.
And and of course we stole a lot of the land from the Indigenous Mexicans as well. California, California, Arizona, New Mexico,
Texas. You're
yeah,
like,
and all those Western movies, they completely got the history of like Texas independence messed up, but actually, wait one moment.
So funny.
Wow, what is going on with our Zoom today? Like, you were saying.
I think I think we see things for what they are now, and it's harder to just be like, yay, America, I'm proud to be from. No, but I think we can make it a place that maybe the next generation can be really proud of, and that they can go, or when they go to Europe or they go on a trip abroad, they're going to get a different reaction than, oh my God, what is going on in that place? Which is what I get a lot. And I think they'll have a different reaction. Like, God, you guys really did some great work over the 20 years. You're a real shining star. Like, I think we.
So you're really but you've said many times in this conversation that you're really optimistic about the future, and I'm quite surprised that you're so optimistic about the future, because I'm so pessimistic about the future. Given that given that, look at the people who are ruling us. We have we have the white Obama, Justin Trudeau. We have the grotesque Boris Johnson, the grotesque Scott Morrison. Donald Trump and now Joe Biden, both very, both rival oligarchs, rival war profiteers, and rival settler colonialists and serial rapists and whatnot, ties to Epstein and everything. But it's interesting that you're saying that you do have hope in the next generation.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of have to have a vampire's view of things. Like, it's a long game for humanity. We are one tiny part of it. Like, me as a person, I'm one tiny part of a very long game of fate and destiny and God knows what else. and space dust. And so I don't count anything out. And so I kind of feel that, yes, all of those bad people are still in charge, but they're all very old. Very old. And like 75% of boomers will have some form of mental problem or dementia or Alzheimer's in the next, like, it's literally like 75% of them will have that in the next like 5 to 10 years.
Boomers.
I know. I'm like, they did not plan well. They did not plan well. They too much lead paint.
Your words, not mine. I don't want to. I don't want to.
Oh yeah, no, blame it on me. I'm terrible. I mean, I hate everything and everybody, but you know, I like animals and justice. So it puts me in a way. I am. I'm very. I think it's because the millennials and Gen Z, they're the biggest voting bloc coming up. You have a bunch of voters who are going to be dropping off because of age and illness. And that's the future. Those are the people that are going to make these decisions. And it's going to be more unions at Amazon and better care and access to health. Those are things that they're going to demand.
Wow.
Student loans, marijuana, whatever it is. I think that generation is going to demand it. And they're going to have to listen if anybody wants to come up. But I think the idea is get rid of, you know, there's somewhere between Joe Biden and Lauren Boebert that we could actually find. And I think that's the people that, you know, we get all those people with a little bit different thoughts and a little bit different perspectives, and we actually get in there and do the work.
And unless, I think that, you know, and unless, you know, climate change wipes us out, you know, more quickly than we thought, or accidental nuclear war, or both of those things,
right?
Does that mean, can you see in America where even the electoral system is radically changed, that a Jill Stein or a Ralph Nader or a Jesse Ventura or a Gloria La Riva can become presidents then? Yeah,
I think that's exactly what's happening. And I think there's always that, like I said, it's a last gasp of a dying generation or a dying thought. We all thought that 2012 was the world going to end. And a lot of people actually kind of felt that it was a change in mindset. It was like an old world dying and a new one beginning. And that's what we see. That's why we have eras and ages. And sometimes in those spots, humanity grows really fast. They figure tons of stuff out, medically, whatever, very quickly when they have to. And I think we're about to hit a moment like that. I mean, I'm not Nostradamus. I think we have a lot of access to information, and people are learning how to see that information and read it and process it and put it in their own life. And
okay, interesting.
I feel like we're going to be all right.
All right.
I know. Well, like I said, I'm a very hateful, angry person, but I actually am like pretty positive.
All righty. Well, we end the program. We end the program nowadays with the questionnaire that was started by first Marcel Proust, later the French broadcaster Bernard Pivot, and later James Lipton, the late great James Lipton.
Inside the Actors Studio. Yes.
Inside the Actors Studio. Ms. Wallace, it is your turn to do it. So, all righty. So here goes before I let you enjoy your evening. So, Ms. Wallace, what is your favorite word?
Fuck.
What's your least favorite words?
Moist.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Adventurous spirits.
What turns you off?
Toxic masculinity, probably, like just angry.
Yeah. And
just angry to be angry.
And
I got lost on that one. I was like,
and what's your favorite curse word?
Well, I have to say fuck again, but it's actually goddamn. Goddamn. Okay. So that's my actual favorite curse word. My just favorite word is fuck because it rattles people. It gets them off their. It's very useful. It's like Smurf. You can use it for a lot of things, but my favorite actual curse word is God damn it. God damn it. God damn it. Bad, same thing, but yeah, that's my favorite.
And what sound or noise do you love?
Birds.
What sound or noise do you hate then? Corporate
I guess
media.
corporate media. Yeah, like that is like, how do I describe the sound of cable news? That, yeah, I feel like sounds are when they're trying, like sounds that are trying to annoy you. Like
Yeah.
they're meant to annoy you. It's, you know, construction vehicles scraping on, it's stuff like that. It's stuff that's just not natural. Sounds that aren't natural.
Now, Ms. Wallace, you are an independent filmmaker right now, right?
Correct.
So then, what profession, if you weren't doing what you're doing right now, would you like to do? And now you're someone who's been a journalist. You're someone who's worked for for media companies like Miramax. So if you weren't doing the projects you're doing right now and whatever project you're going to be doing afterwards,
right,
what would you love to do then?
I'd like to have a shop like Sandra Bullock had in Practical Magic, where I just make I have a greenhouse and then I make lotions and salves. That's what I think I would be doing with a ton of an animal rescue attached to it. That's what I would do.
And you'd be fantastic doing that. But then, but then, what profession would you absolutely not want to do under any circumstances?
Accounting.
Then here comes the final one. If heaven exists, Ms. Wallace, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates, or whatever it is, the afterlife that you envision, or even don't envision, because lots of atheists have had to answer this question.
Yes, obviously, with the caveat, well, if there's a God and a pearly gates and all that shit turns out to be real, the thing I would love to hear from God when I reach the pearly gates is, God damn, I didn't think you'd make it. That's because I think he'd be shocked. I think that if there's a God like that, God is gonna be like, we had a bet that you weren't gonna make it over.
All righty. Well, oh my gosh, look at that. The hour or two has flown by. We were joined on this edition of 1+1 with Miss Tabetha Wallace, former co-host of Watching the Hawks on the now censored RT, and solidarity to RT, Redfish, Soapbox, and Sputnik for the censorship that they face. And even though Ms. Wallace said that there was a lot of toxic office place bullying and so forth like that, we still say solidarity to those whose First Amendment rights are under attack. So solidarity to them, and of course to Julian Assange. Miss Wallace, it was actually, hold up. You still there? Okay, perfect. Yes, I just wanted to say, Miss Wallace, it was such an honor to speak to you. I hope we get the chance to speak to each other in the future and have you on as a regular. And I just want to say, if someone was to ask me, Youri, what would if you weren't doing 1+1 and dependence on your parents, what job would you like to do, the dream job? And it would be the following. I would love to co-host 3 shows. One with my best friend Pierre Olivier, where we're playing EDM music and progressive house and so forth, or do a political show with my friend Julia, where we bitch about everything and anything and play whatever music we want. But also, I would love to co-host a radio show or an MC or a music video show, and you would be the perfect co-host to do that with.
You never know what happens.
It could be in Wisconsin. It could be in Minnesota. I don't give a shit. Hey, as long as the co-host would be Ms. Wallace, and we play whatever music and we talk whatever the hell we want to talk about, that would be my dream job.
You never know. You never know in this world. I'll tell you that. I've had a lot of strange jobs and a lot of strange things end up in my life, and yeah.
Well, if you
never know.
Well, if you need, and of course, if you need an intern for the project or future projects you're working on, do know that I'm your Negro that you can do that with. So. All right. Well, Ms. Wallace, you have a fantastic afternoon and evening. It was such an honor to speak to you. I'm looking forward to uploading this and and sharing it with the world. And yes, let's remain in touch. Best of luck with everything, and I hope to I hope we continue to remain in touch and everything. All right.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
It was an honor. Ciao till then, and keep on watching the Hawks.
Absolutely.
All right. Ciao till then.
Bye.